As you might remember last year on HIListically Speaking, I took part in a really amazing charitable event that podcasters across the world are a part of, and it's called Podcasthon. And it basically is devoting a week in March to charities around the world. I know that I have a responsibility as a podcaster. I've been doing this now for 6 years. I've been in the media for 30 years. And I don't take that lightly. I don't take this space lightly. So when I have an opportunity to share stories with the world, share people with you, with the world, and just take this moment to think about the amazing people that touch, move, and inspire us, I know that that should not be taken lightly. So I'm doing Podcasthon again this year. And I had picked out the charity like 6 months ago, maybe even longer. And there's a reason why. There are people on this earth that are angels, that are truly making a difference. I wish I could hold space for all of them. But when I met Rob Scheer, I knew that Comfort Cases was the charity that I wanted to support during Podcasthon. And we're doing this one a little differently. Rob, I want to bring you in here because your story is really one that I prefer you share. And when we met at the pickleball tournament, which was quite an experience, you had such a light about you and you were so dynamic. And I didn't really know anything about Comfort Cases, but getting to know you and watching you over the last couple months and communicating with you, I saw just how special this charity is that you created because it really is your story. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing and creating a space of dignity and support with so many children around the world.
Hilary, first I have to say thank you. Thank you for even looking at comfort cases and be able to give us this platform. We're a 96% volunteer ran organization, and I come from the .com world. I'm a taker, and for my career, I thought that that's what it was. I was in a boardroom with my suit and tie, and I was living the American dream. I had come from a system that was shattered. I was a kid that was handed a trash bag at the age of 12 after coming from the worst abuse that children should ever experience, not really knowing what the word love was really and what the definition of love was. Life was hard as a young boy, and but I what I chose to do was not to allow the system that I was in, foster care, to define who I am today as a man. I look back and I look at my brothers and sisters. I'm the youngest of 10 kids, Hilary. My mother had been married 6 times. We lived in and out of every shelter in Maryland, Virginia, DC. Never once remember a Christmas tree, a birthday cake. And the saddest thing is I never remember her voice where she would ever say, I love you. I love you. It's something that I say to my kids on a daily basis. And I say it because I know them to never forget it. Never forget it. And as a 59-year-old man, I look back, Hillary, and I think that if I could just hear her words again, if I could just see her look at me and say that I mattered, that I did matter, that I wasn't a number. But that didn't happen. Instead, I was put in a system, handed a trash bag, and I proceeded to do the walk. And then I turned 18. It was the fall of 1984. I will never forget it. I was a kid who had the F word in front of his name, but I never thought about that because I was with a family and had been with the family for years. I called her mom and dad. And even though they never took me on vacations and showered me with birthday gifts like they did their biological kids, I still had a family. I still had a home. And that changed on that fall day when I turned 18. And even though I was still a senior in high school, the system had failed me again. The system had decided because I was 18, no longer would a check be paid to people that were taking care of me. And so when the check wasn't coming, I wasn't no longer needed and I became homeless. As we gather here to talk today, we will see 700 kids enter foster care in the United States. That's one kid every 2 minutes that's enter foster care. They enter because of a choice someone else made, a choice someone else made. No child I have ever met, and I have met hundreds of thousands of kids, they have never, ever come to me and said, Mr. Rob, I want to be in foster care. They would rather go back to the abuse, the neglect, anything to be in a system that makes them feel less than. But for me, that trash bag was handed to me on that fall day. And at that point, I had a decision to make. See, kids in foster care are only given three choices. That's it. Choice number one, we give up. Give up. Suicide rate in foster care is higher than we have ever seen before. Choice number two, we give in. We do exactly what you expect of us. We commit your petty crimes. We fill your detention centers. 80% of our death row inmates, they were either in foster care or touched by foster care. If that doesn't tell you that we have a system within our country that has failed, I don't think nothing else will. But for me, I decided to do choice number three, and that's give it all I got. And that's what I did. I hid my trash bag. I walked into school. I let those kids spit on me and kick me and push me in lockers, but I showed up and I learned in those books and I showed up for graduation and I graduated. And even though not one damn person clapped for me, I earned that place there. And then I walked away and I joined the United States Navy. And I didn't join the Navy to take care of anybody, my friend. I joined the Navy to take care of me.
What comes to mind when you share this story, and to be able to turn such a traumatic experience into a triumph, which is basically what Holistically Speaking is all about, are these trauma to triumph stories. You're the epitome of that journey and hope for all of these other kids, and you speak with such passion. You really do, which is what pulled me in the first time I saw you at that pickleball tournament, and all of the beautiful backpacks that were laid out, that were being stocked and just filled with things that can bring a sense of dignity to a child that doesn't have to have a trash bag, and belonging, and hopefully one day a forever family.
And let's talk about the trash bag. It was handed to me in the 70s. It was handed to me again in the 80s. I never thought about it again when I joined the Navy because guess what? I remember I went to that hotel, the Red Roof Inn. It was in Fort Meade, Maryland, and I had hitchhiked to the naval base. And I walked onto the base and said I wanted to join the United States Navy. And the person at the gate said, "Son, we don't do it like that. You have to go to this recruiter. I had to take a test and all of that." And I remember I did all of that. Took us weeks. I still was homeless. And the Navy put me up at the Red Roof Inn the day before I shipped out. And I remember I walked into that Red Roof Inn. I had never stayed in a hotel. And I shut the door behind me. I'd been homeless at that point. I'd been homeless for roughly about 9 months. And the only thing I wanted to do was take a shower. I remember I walked into that room with my trash bag, my little belongings that I actually had. And I got in the shower and I remember standing there and I scrubbed like I'd never scrubbed before because I felt the dirt that was inside of me. Because for so many years, things happened to me that should never have happened to a child. In so many years, I had felt neglected and felt less than. And it kept going back to that trash bag. And when I walked out of that Red Roof Inn that morning, I will never forget it. I left that trash bag there. I didn't take it with me. When I got on that bus at Fort Meade and went to Dulles Airport, I had nothing, nothing but the clothes that were on my back. And I decided not to talk about my life again. But when I walked onto that naval base in Great Lakes, Illinois, I looked at myself in the mirror on that very first night, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning as I was being screamed at by company commanders. And I looked in myself in the mirror and I said, Robert, you're gone. And Rob, you're here. And I became Rob. And from this day forward, my name is Rob. And it is on my honorary doctorate. It is on all my documents because that's who I relate myself to.
I want to say first and foremost, thank you for your service. I have an unbelievable appreciation and respect for our servicemen and women. Part of that is because I live that life myself. So making a really big choice to join the military and the branch of the Navy and not have anything before that guided you towards that. I'm curious why you took that step. Was it looking for a family? Was it turning trash bag to duffel bag? Was it to get out? I mean, everyone has their own story on why they choose the military.
I was looking for food. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, I was a scrawny, long-haired, dirty, rotten teeth. By the way, my beautiful teeth and my teeth are beautiful. It cost me an arm and a leg. I didn't know anybody in the military, by the way.
Yeah,
I wasn't a privy to that life.
sure.
Um, so, I just knew that it was a place that I could go that would give me 3 square meals and a roof over my head. And by the way, I am sorry the fact that kids in foster care feel like that's our only way to go. And I'm seeing some change in that throughout our country. But for me, that was the way I could go. And if I didn't go that way, I was going to end up like my brothers and sisters, and I didn't want that. I was done blaming the system. I just wanted to worry about myself. And by the way, I made it. I became a very successful businessman. I had companies all over this country. I realized what was important. It was me, me, me. I bought my big house, I bought my fancy cars, and then 21 years ago, I met my husband. And my life changed. See, I was a jet setting guy who only cared about himself until I met Reese. And I remember on my very first date, I looked at Reese and I said, "Hey, do you think you ever want to be a dad?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "Do you think you ever want to be a dad?" He said, "That's the craziest question I've ever had anybody ask me on a date." And I
Yeah.
said,
Not exactly first date material.
I'm in my 30s, and I said, and I'm not getting any younger. And I said, and the one thing that I've always wanted to do in my life is be a dad. And I said, and I don't want to waste my time with somebody who has no concept or desire to ever have a child in their life. And he said, we're gay, and this is not. And I said, yeah, I know. And I don't know any gay people that have kids. I said, but I want to be a dad. And he said, guess what? And I said, what? He said, so do I. And that was the moment 21 years ago. And my husband and I started the journey. And by the way, most people think when you're gay, we move in together like that. But by the way, my husband and I didn't. We actually lived separately for 4 years. We dated for 4 years. And I remember when we decided to move in together and start to build our family, I immediately wanted to adopt overseas. And I remember my husband saying to me, why are we not adopting out of foster care? And I was like, dude, are you serious? I was like, I know about those kids. He was like, yeah, you were one of those kids. And I was like, oh my God, he was right. My husband's really smart, by the way. He has his master's. I don't even know the difference between there, and there. But, he actually does. And he said to me, he said, Rob, if we could actually change a child's life for just one day, don't you think we made an impact? God, he was right. And so with that, we started the process. We were going to be foster parents, hoping to one day adopt. And little would I know that within a matter of 3 months, we would have 4 kids arrive at our home. My daughter Amaya arrived with my son Makai, and both of them had a trash bag. And I'm telling you, Hilary, that hit me so hard. I had not thought about it. It had not been brought up in the social work training. And there they stood at my doorstep with a black trash bag.
So when that happened, what came to your mind when you saw exactly a mirror of your own youth?
I will tell you, as I stood there in that doorway, I remember the wave of emotions. And I remember asking the social worker, I said, "Are you kidding me?" And she said, "What?" I said, "Are you telling me after all of these years that I've been out of the system that we are still using trash bags?" And she looked at me and said, "Well, what are we supposed to use?" Whew. But by the way, I was a dad, and I was a dad to 2 of the most amazing little kids, and I was a dad to a girl. And I'm gonna tell you something right now, Hilary, who I get chills thinking about it. Being a father to a girl is no other feeling than you can ever get. Let me tell you something, my princess, she was the saddest little girl. And I remember we had bought all these toys and all these new clothes, and by the way, the stuff that was in those trash bags, I wouldn't even allow my dog to lay on that stuff. That's how bad it is within the system. And I remember laying on her bed, there were 3 nightgowns, and she had walked into her new room getting out of the tub with all the bubbles, and she still didn't smile. And she walked over to the bed and she picked up the nightgown, and I remember it was a princess nightgown, Disney princesses. And she picked up that nightgown and she tore the little tag off and she turned around and she smiled. And I said, "Amaya, why are you smiling?" And she said, "Mr. Rob, I've never owned a new nightgown." Wow, gosh, my 4-year-old to say that, to know that. I just realized that we couldn't make that go any further. But for me, it was about being a dad. But then the month went by, another month, and then the phone rang, and lo and behold, my two boys arrived. My son Grayson, who was 2, with his little baby brother, who was 6 months old. And by the way, we went from no kids to 4 kids within 3 months, all 4 in diapers. One child nonverbal who they said would never walk. People looked at us like we were crazy. And by the way, we probably were. But guess what? We were the best crazy there could ever be.
I love that. So at some point, those trash bags turned into a vision which became comfort cases.
Let me tell you what happened though. Okay. The shocking thing was I once again forgot about the trash bag. Okay. Because again, I was trying to cover my children from even considering where they came from.
Mm. Mm.
Truthfully. So when we adopted them almost 2 years later, the first thing that we did, we got them passports. The next thing I did was I put them in designer clothes. The next thing I did is I put them in private schools. And then I proceeded to give them the life. And we did that life for several years until 13 years ago, I was sitting in my office right outside of DC. My husband had given up his career. He was a stay at home dad. He would do all the fun things with the company, like do the yearly toy drives at Christmas. And he walked into my office and he said, "Okay, I'm getting ready to grab Noelle, who was my EA, and say, we're going to plan out the toy drive." And I said, Reese, I don't want to do it. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Reese, we have failed our kids." I said, "We forgot to teach our kids two of the most important things." And let me tell you why this hit me, Hilary, and I've never shared this before in any podcast. It was a week prior to this moment that I actually was looking at myself and realizing what a disservice that I had done to my children and to myself because I was so worried about people wanting to break bread with me. That if people realized that I was that guy that you walked by that was eating out of that trash can, would you truly have a conversation with me? And I realized that I was not my authentic self. I was not the person that I needed to be on that day. And I knew, and I looked at him and I said, we have not taught our kids empathy.
Mm.
And by the way, empathy is not in your DNA. Empathy is taught. And
Mhm.
I said that we forgot to teach our kids our legacy. Your legacy is about what you give and not what you take. I said, "Reese, I have shunned the kids about where they came from." And I pulled out a trash bag that I had kept in my desk. And I said, "I'm going to eliminate these in foster care in DC." He said, "You're batshit crazy." I said, "I know, that's why you married me." I said, "We're going to do this." So we gathered members of our church, local politicians, some of my senior staff, and I told the story, a story that I was ashamed to tell. The story of the 12-year-old little boy who'd walked in a system because of a choice someone else had made. The choice to hand him a trash bag to define who he was. The boy who was handed the trash bag again in the 80s when he turned 18. And then to fast forward to have these 4 innocent children arrive at my doorstep with trash bags. I knew how I felt and I knew how my children felt as I looked in their eyes when they arrived. And I said, "This can no longer go on." And so I grabbed a backpack and I said to everybody that I know what needs to go in this backpack. And by the way, it wasn't iPads and all of those things. It was a brand new pair of pajamas with a tag on it. It was a brand new lotion, shampoo, conditioner, and a bar of soap. See, when I was 12 years old and I walked into that very first house, one of the first things I remember is the bar of soap that lied in that bathtub. A bar of soap that I was required to go and lather myself up with. Kids come into a system and they walk into a house of strangers. You expect us to assimilate like that. But we also have mindsets and trauma that we must go through. I want every kid to get a toothbrush and toothpaste. I wanted every kid to get their own activity, their own stuffed animal, their own book. But my son Grayson, he was 5 when we packed our very first case. Hilary's now 18. He said, "Daddy, we have to put a blankie in every case." And I was like, "A blankie?" I was like, "Grayson, come on, these kids aren't cold." He said, "I know, Daddy." He said, "But every time they wrap themselves up in their blankie, they know we love them."
It's a hug, right? That's a hug. That's the hug that you're giving all of these children and everybody that's part of Comfort Cases. I'm so touched by this, and I know that people that are tuning into this are going to be equally touched. And if you want to learn more about Comfort Cases, I just want to remind you that you can just check the notes of this podcast. We're going to share everything about Rob and everything about Comfort Cases and how you can support this amazing charity because every child, as you've said many times, Rob, every child deserves that dignity they deserve the belonging, and they deserve a forever family. And you've turned that truly into a mission that you're not done yet. That's what I think is so amazing about you, is that your
Oh,
advocacy is really just beginning, even though it's in only its 13th year. Just seeing what you're doing and what you're advocating for, and going to legislature and making change, because we are in a broken system
we no,
in
no, we're not.
many areas.
We're in a shattered system.
Shattered system. Yes, you actually mentioned that. We're beyond broken when it comes to the kids, and I hear this so often. So what do we need to do? What would you like people to know is necessary to help the foster care system in comfort cases, really?
Well, the fact is that for so many years, Hillary, I was angry. I was mad at my community. I continued to keep going the walk, but the anger was built inside of me. You let me down. You failed me. But what I found out through this journey is that my community didn't fail me. My community weren't educated about me.
Mhm.
And that's what I want people to do is I want people to be educated about foster care. I want people to understand that kids in foster care are not bad kids, that kids in foster care deserve everything that we can give them. And if we don't start doing that, we'll continue to build the prisons. For me, what I want to see us do, and I'm going to say it right here and right now, we have got to get back to society of the race that we know we are, which is the race to care for each other. And if you see that neighbor not have their lights on for 2 weeks and their children are out in the grass and they look disheveled, walk over and ring their doorbell and say, "Is there something I can help you with?"
Be the neighbor.
Be the neighbor. Our
Right.
forefathers built communities for one reason, and that's to take care of each other. And we've forgotten that along the way. I'm seeing kids ripped out of their families of origin because of the word neglect. 64% of our kids in foster care arrive in the system because of that word neglect. And I will tell you that word neglect is poverty. Poverty. Mom cannot afford to pay the electric. And so she has no electric, but has two kids. She goes to work every single day, but she can't turn the lights on. And somebody finds out about it and they don't help her. They take her children and they give a stranger a check. Why didn't I give her that check? Why didn't I get that lights on? Mom leaves her 5-year-old with her 12-year-old. The neighbor calls CPS. Why didn't the neighbor walk over and say, "Can I help watch your kids while you go work two damn jobs?" We have forgotten why we are here. And why we are here is to lift each other up.
That's a mindset too. You mentioned that empathy is something that's learned, and that behavior is also learned, because we can say we're a product of our environment. But here I am talking to somebody who was living the life. You were making the money, you were doing you and at
I
first you
was.
right, right, you were. And you were even teaching your children uh, a way to live that you completely shifted to bring in these qualities that we want our neighbors to have as well as ourselves. So how has that been for you going forward? I mean, where is this how do we do this, Rob?
You made the comment that the product of the environment, people used to say that all the time about my mom, is
Mm.
that she was a product of her environment. That's not true. My mother was a product of her choices. Each and every one of us are a product of our choices. Okay. I had a choice to blame the system or get in here and change the system. I had a choice to be the, "Oh, poor me, look at my bad childhood, oh, all my trauma," or I take my pain and put it into my purpose. That is where we need to connect at. We need to connect at the fact that every single child deserves to know they have one person there rooting them on. See, I knew that in 2019 when I met our fifth child, a young boy at the age of 18 who'd been floundering in a shattered system, 11 homes, 6 schools, not thinking he was going anywhere until he came into my arms. And I realized, as my kids said, "Dad, we have to do something for Alex." And when my son said, "We have to bring him home," and my husband said, "What's one more?" I never would have thought that an 18-year-old would come into my home and I would love him as much as I loved my baby, who was then at that time now 10. But I love my son Alex. And all he needed was one person to believe in him. And now my son Alex is 25 years old, graduating from college, the most amazing human. And why? Because I believed in him. And but guess what? He believes in his dads.
Yeah. Do you think the most important quality to share with a child besides empathy, because you mentioned that, is believing in oneself?
Yes. Let me tell you something. You got to believe in oneself.
Yeah.
The only person that you ever have to please in life is you. You cannot fill someone else's cup unless your cup is full. And I have to tell you, Hilary, my cup is overflowing. I'm getting ready to have my son on my podcast. He's 17 now. I was talking to him the other day and I said, I'd like for you to be my guest on my podcast. He was like, what are you talking about, Dad? And I said, hey, you've grown up. You were 4 years old when we packed our very first case. We have packed over 300,000 of these backpacks. I said, you're now going to be 18 this year. You have grown up with this charity. This is our family's charity. I said, I want to talk to you as a young person of how does this affect you? How do you feel growing up knowing how much we give as our family? I think the generations need to know that the way we will be better tomorrow is by kids helping kids. We have failed more than we ever realize. But if we instill within our young people how they can make the difference of kids helping kids, tomorrow's brighter than it is today. I know that.
I think just talking to you, what's so amazing, Rob, is that this is so much more than comfort cases, meaning the actual product. I know that you have put 300,000 backpacks out there in the hands of children in the foster care system. But this is so much more than what's just physically filling these backpacks, in my opinion. This is filling it with dignity and the idea of you can do anything in your life. You can be loved and you can love and you can offer and you can receive. There's so much more that's filling those backpacks that you're putting out there in the world with comfort cases than just the physical things going in the backpacks. You know, knowing that you have this amazing charity that has grown by leaps and bounds. I mean, let's go back a little bit. You launched this back in 2013, but then 2017 comes around, a video circulates, it goes viral, 150 million views. Suddenly people know what's going on and what comfort cases is. Goes to the next level. There's documentaries. There's so much stuff happening. And look, life's a falling into. It will happen for you because you create the space for it.
I agree. I agree.
We put that gratitude out there, it comes back tenfold.
I agree.
And so everything that's happening, not for you physically, but for what you've created, it just keeps growing. So I'm curious, where do you see, where do you feel? Because what we feel and put out there in the world is what happens, right? We're creating that. What do you feel will be the next step in comfort cases?
Well, we've already started to move forward for the next step of comfort cases as we expand through our horizons. We're in the UK, 84,000 children in the United Kingdom we touch. Next year in 2027, we have finally been approved for our charitable license in Canada. We will be touching the 64,000 children within the territories of Canada. The thing that we must always understand is whether I'm standing in the soils of the United States or I'm standing on the shores of the Bahamas helping children there, every single child deserves to know that we see them. We need to realize, as Nelson Mandela said it, we are judged by the way we treat our children. And kids in foster care, they don't belong to you. They don't belong to me. They don't belong to your listeners. They belong to all of us. To all of us. Every child who is out without that one loving adult belongs to us. And that's how tomorrow gets better. So, what Comfort Cases is doing is we're making sure that people see us. Because when you see us, you see kids in foster care. We're trying to get people to change their vocabulary. They are not foster kids. These are kids. They're experiencing foster care. It doesn't define them. It doesn't make them decide that that is the tunnel they must stay in. It makes them realize that this is just a part of them. It's a part that builds their armor of life. And I'm glad my armor was built through foster care. I am not ashamed to say that I am an alumni of foster care. And I don't ever want my children to look back and say they can't say that they were in foster care, because foster care is not a dirty word.
The difference between what your children have experienced and what you experienced, your children have been adopted, correct? Did you ever have that No.
I never had that. I never had that sense of belonging. But I will have to tell you, my husband, he's made sure to fill that. I remember when I was 40 years old, I'd never had a birthday party.
Mm.
And my husband surprised me with my 40th birthday party. From that moment, my husband has made sure that every single holiday is celebrated with so much joy that, everything, every milestone, all the things that I never had as a young boy, our children don't do without, and neither do I do without. But I will say, when I wake up at 4 in the morning and I'm sitting there by myself, um, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm not the guy who like wishes. I said this. I just would love to hear her voice.
That hit me. I'm sitting here thinking about that. Just hearing you say that, I'm very fortunate. I feel very fortunate that I had parents that were participatory and in my life, and to know that you didn't have that. I hope, and from what I hear, you have people around you that are giving you so much of that. There is a part of Rob's life that has not been filled. You know.
Yeah. As I look back, and yeah, there is a part of my life that will never be filled, by the way. But at the same time, you're exactly right. I've created my own family. I've created my own parents. I've created my own grandparents. I have had the love of so many people who have taken the roles that I've always wanted people to take. And even at almost 60 years old, um, you still want your
Yeah.
parents.
There's always a
You do.
child in us, always.
Yes,
And I would
always.
say this, let me ask you this, the Rob that's here today, that I'm sure is gonna have a huge 60th birthday party. Reese, are you listening? The Rob that's here today, like, what would he say to the younger Rob?
Just never stop believing in yourself. Never stop believing in yourself. I still get emotional because, and I've done this dance, I can't even tell you how many times in 13 years, but it's still very raw. And, you know, the things we must understand is trauma. And no matter how many therapy hours I do a week, and by the way, I love my Dr. Rich and I see him often weekly, it still doesn't take away the void. And it still doesn't take away the what ifs and why. You know what? I like this route. I like this person, and I love where I'm at, and I am just so excited about where I'm going. I wish it would slow down some. My kids, I've got four of them out of school and only one left, and um, I was in a staff meeting today, Hilary, and as I had my team in the staff meeting, um, I looked in the Zoom, and there was my son. My son actually works for me. He graduated high school and is trying to figure out what he wants to do, and that's okay. And as I was looking, having the staff meeting ended, and I went to the bathroom, and my son happened to be standing in there, and he said, "Dad," I said, "What?" He said, "You always have the right things to say." You know, having your kids say that to you, that knowing how much my son has sacrificed, because his father is a public figure or he's traveling or those are times that just, it's more than any money could give you.
Yeah, that's powerful. Those are, those are powerful words that I think so many are going to connect with, whether they've been part of this foster care system or not. I I imagine being a dad that even just multiplies that feeling, because you mentioned legacy as a word so many times. And in that, I would love to play a little game with you. Let's lighten this up just a little bit. Yeah? So I play a game on the Holistically Speaking podcast called Brain Candy. And Brain Candy is basically like a rapid fire word association game. I've been writing down some words that Rob has said. And what I would love for you to do is I'm going to say these words and come back with one word that you associate with it, one word that comes to mind.
Okay,
Let's see
let's
where
do
your
it.
mind is. Let's lighten this up a little bit because this is good stuff we're doing.
Yeah, let's
All
do
right,
it.
let's do it. Here we go.
Take it all off. Let's
All
do it.
right. Dignity,
One word that says when that I have to say one word that when you say dignity, you say dignity, I say foster.
neglect,
My mom.
neighbor,
I wish.
homeless,
I hate to say this, and people are going to probably email you, but it's, again, homeless is, a trigger for me. It is. You say that word, and, every time I pull up at a stoplight, I make a point to look at that person standing at the corner because I was that person one time. And when you look away from that person, you are losing everything that person is trying to gain.
mm,
Yeah. Homeless. Dignity.
navy,
My escape.
family,
My life.
foster care. 2 words, but
Foster care. Legacy.
adoption,
Connection.
empathy,
Love.
and this one I know is going to break you. Dad,
Reward.
reward. Rob, oh goodness. You're a joy. You really are. I want to spend some more time getting to know you. I'm just elated to be able to support you and Comfort Cases with Holistically Speaking and Podcasthon. This is just such a powerful episode, and it means so much more than just, like I said, just the backpacks themselves. I mean, this is really about building a global village. You said we need to return to neighbor, we need to return to family, we need to check on the people next door, and whether you are part of a system or not. And I don't even like to say system because
Right.
good lord, I mean, we use that word a lot in most of the systems we have in this country, and I have no problem saying it, are broken, if not beyond broken. And it's really up to us to heal the wounds, but heal our own wounds first, Heal
Yes.
our own way.
Yes.
Like, we're responsible for this. And to those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, I'm holding my heart here because we have a responsibility to self first. And I think this kind of goes back to what you just said. It's not about being a product of the environment. When I say that, what I mean is, from the age of 1 to 18, 0 to 18, from the time we're brought into this world to when we are 18, it really is the responsibility of an adult to make sure we're safe and take care of us. And then as we become an adult, blaming others and not working on ourselves, really that's it's our responsibility at that point. And I think you really are the perfect example of that because you could have gone down the other road, you
Yeah.
know, and you didn't. And and let this be a message to those that might be struggling with whatever you're struggling with, that there is always possibility. There's always possibility with the right
Always.
people, with the right support, but really coming back to what you said, Rob, which is about starting with self. And I couldn't agree more.
And by the way, just to make sure everybody knows this, starting with self can be at any time.
Mhm,
You can be at your 60. You
mhm.
know, I will say, and God, we could have so many more conversations, but I remember when I finally was thinking about myself, it was after my fourth overdose attempt, suicide. Fourth is when I finally realized that, you know what, all of that happened, I can't allow it to define me.
Mhm.
You know, and then what I started was forgiveness. I went to my parents' grave and I forgave them.
That's a powerful word. When you think of forgiveness, what do you think of?
When I think of forgiveness, I think of letting go.
Yeah,
Yeah. See, you don't forgive somebody for them. You forgive somebody for yourself.
that's
It
right.
brings the power back to you.
That's the true surrender.
That's what forgiveness is. I forgave my parents, even though they had abused me and neglected me and have hurt me and hurt my siblings. I forgave them. And the reason I forgave them was not for them to lie in that ground feeling any more restless. It was to make sure that I took the power back. And by the way, when I walked away from that grave when I was 24 years old, I never went back again. and I've never been back again. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. And I took what I needed to take, which was myself. And by the way, Hilary, from that day forward, I've never had a suicide attempt, a drug overdose, or anything like that from that day.
Proud of you. That's great. I'm glad
Thank
to hear that. It's setting a powerful example for not just the 5 children you have, but for the thousands, if not more, that have been impacted by the work that you're doing, by Comfort Cases. We're going to share all of that in the notes of this podcast so that you can do your part, be a neighbor, right? And help in any way possible with Comfort Cases and give children that dignity. Let them carry something that's their own. One thing I'd love to share with you, and this goes back to the program I have, which is called the Hug It Out program. In the healing, there is humor. There's always humor, which is the understanding, which is who you are and how you're showing up in the world, and gratitude, which is not about the gratitude for outside world, but the gratitude you have for self. So in that, what would be something that you do in your life every day that's you hugging it out with yourself?
Oh my gosh, I love this. So every single morning, okay, I have started this, as I told you, the awakening. And I really do. I take my morning, 15 minutes in the morning, and I really go over my why. Before I look at my phone, before I check my calendar, before I have my coffee, before I let the dogs out, I recap my why. My why. Because that's what we all need to know, is what is your why? Why are you waking up? Why are you moving forward? Why are you trying to move the stone that seems so big that you think will never move? But I tell you that if you get your why checked, that stone will move. My why.
Your hug is your why.
My
Love
hug is
it.
my why.
That is beautiful. You're a joy. You really are. I could talk to you for hours. I could laugh with you for hours too. I could fill a bunch of backpacks too.
Oh, yes. We're going to do it again, by the way. I'm going to see you again, by the way. Come May, I'm coming up to your neck of the woods. I heard we're going to do some, what is that new thing that everybody's doing?
Mahjong. That sounds like something my grandma used to do.
What is that?
Is it that has become like the new thing of this next generation?
We are getting ready to have this big fundraiser up in Red Bank, or we're right up there. Yes.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
And
May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. We're gonna bring in some money for kids in foster care.
Cinco de Mahjong.
Mahjong, So yeah, we all.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, there's so much more coming. We're going to share everything in the notes. Thank you so much for being here and just being the joy that you are. And thanks for choosing to hug it out.
Yeah, we will hug again. Take care, my friend.
If you want to support or donate to Comfort Cases, I've shared all the information in the notes of this podcast, as well as how you can connect with Rob or even get involved with the organization yourself. And if this episode touched, moved, and inspired you in any way, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell so you never miss an episode. And go ahead, leave a comment. I love hearing from you and what you're doing to be kind to your mind. Special thanks to Podcasthon for inviting me to join them for another year, and to all the podcasters that are taking part, to my dear friend Lipbone Redding for always providing the music and the creativity with this show, and also to you for tuning in and choosing to hug it out with yourself and be kind to your mind. It doesn't go unnoticed. On that note, I love you, I believe in you, and I'm sending hugs your way. Be well.